Hi, welcome back. This is Forged in Fundamentals, and I'm your host, John Gray, and I'm here today with James Stiltner. And today we're going to talk a lot about tracking and different things, and he's going to describe what that is. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
So I'm James Stiltner. I got into canine probably in 2018, where I started decoying for the agency that I worked for. And then in 21, I started handling a dog. He was a dual purpose dog, trained narcotics and then in apprehension. Handled him for a little while, got him all trained up, got him ready, started working the road. And then after a few deployments where we were looking for people in the middle of fields and not being able to find them and kind of just aimlessly walking around, kind of started to see the need for a dog that could track. And so that kind of got me interested in the whole tracking thing. Reached out to a bunch of people, started learning from them about what is tracking, how to do it, how to train it, all that. And then ended up getting approved to go out to Cedar Creek Kennels out in Monmouth, Illinois, where I ended up learning from Dave Wayne and Matt Greenleaf out there on how to track with my dog, and spent 10 weeks out there learning to track, going through their basic handler course. It was really a great experience just getting to see different ways on how to train dogs rather than just this is one way. Got to ask them a lot of questions, but ended up learning to track through them, and then came back and it was something that definitely was a benefit to us because we were able to locate more people, recover evidence, do anything that you really needed involved in tracking. Then got the opportunity a year later to go back out to Cedar Creek Kennels and be an instructor through them, where I spent 12 weeks training 12 dual purpose dogs on tracking odors such as like explosives and then narcotics, and then got to come back and start teaching other people with it, which was great. Start working for Kingdom Canine, where we do all sorts of things, where we teach pet dogs, we teach tracking, we teach apprehension, we teach decoy work, we teach as much as there is, we teach, which is great. It's super fun getting to do that. But kind of my niche was the tracking portion. I think it's one of the coolest things that you get to do in law enforcement.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild tool, and I think that when for listeners who don't know, they might see something on a TV show where we get a dog out and the dog takes us to wherever we need to go, but there's so much work that actually goes into teaching a dog tracking. So maybe for the listeners, kind of describe what the dog is doing when they're tracking and what kind of odor are they using to track somebody.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but really the basics are with tracking. I mean, there's tracking versus trailing. Tracking is where a dog is more particular on that area where the person actually went. They are on that track right there. Trailing dog might be a few feet off, might be a little further off, but they're still following the track. They're just further off. That's really what it comes down to, and how high their nose is to the ground. But tracking, these dogs are looking for ground disturbance. So whenever you walk anywhere, you're walking on grass, you're breaking the grass blades, or you walk over a stick or leaves, it's all leaving an odor, and the dogs are able to smell that. And they can be able to pick up on that, but then they're also using human odor. So like when someone walks, you're dropping skin cells everywhere. Like as we're just sitting here, our skin cells are just falling off. They're falling to the ground. They're blowing away. And that's what the dogs use, is they both will use ground disturbance, but also the human odor to track. I mean, there's multiple ways that you can get it. It's pretty amazing. Like once you actually start getting into it with how people teach, you can do it a million ways. But really what it comes down to is what works for the dog.
Yep.
Like I've trained certain dogs on where you use food and you put food on the track, and that's how they learn how to track. I think that's the best way to do it, because you have a dog that wants to be on that track because they've learned everything good comes from being on that track, and that's how they eat. You can also do it with articles, where you throw an article out and then you're back chaining it to where you walk out, drop the article, and then you pull the dog back so he knows where the article is, but then he's tracking where you are. So you're teaching him that way. There's people who are doing amazing stuff where they're teaching dogs to track with t-shirts, where they're taking the color of the ground and they're breaking up t-shirts and laying it down, and that's how they're teaching to track. There's so many ways to do it. It's just what works for the dog.
Yeah, it's probably like any dog training. You have to be pretty flexible because, Even like when we trained a bunch of our dogs on tracking, not every dog responds the same way, right?
No.
Some dogs might be super into the activity in the beginning. And we kind of found that some dogs, it took them a while to warm up to tracking and then they took off.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes me think of, I'd like to hear your thoughts on like when you were in school training the dogs, were they all the same breed or were you using different breeds?
No, so like we had everything. We had a single purpose lab in there that we taught tracking, but then she also did explosives. We had other dogs that were German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, all sorts of things. Like, and it's amazing just seeing how different they are. Like some dogs are super methodical where they are footstep to footstep and making sure they're on every single step. But then you also have like some mals that are 110 miles an hour and go every which way, but they still tracked.
Yeah.
So it definitely, or trailed, or however they did it, but they did it. So it's just the dogs are going to dictate everything. I think if you have one way of doing something, it's not going to work because not every dog is going to fit into that. I mean, if you're trying to fit a square peg into a circle peg, it's not going to work. But people keep trying to do it. So you have to have so many ways to do it, and you have to be willing to go out and ask people for help. Like I call people all the time, especially Dave Wayne and Matt Greenleaf out at Cedar Creek. I talk to them all the time, and I'm like, I need help. And they're like, hey, try this. And you're like, so you just have to be willing to learn. I mean, it's great going to these conferences and talking to people. Like that's my favorite thing is just go up to people and it's all awkward, but you're like, how do you track? And they start telling you, and you get in this discussion, and you end up and you look up and it's 3-4 hours later and you've been talking about tracking and you have 10 different ways now to do it. And it's super cool to see that with the industry, and just you can make it what you just can learn as much as you want.
Yeah, and it makes me think of, we're gonna probably irritate some people by saying this, but some myth busting, right? So all I hear is if you want a tracking dog, the only dogs that can track are bloodhounds, right?
Yeah.
This is like saying the only dogs that bite are German Shepherds.
Yeah.
But we've learned that there's no science that has proven that that's the case, right? It's just there's a lot of working breeds, and it almost seems like handlers need to pick a breed that works for the job they're going to do because they all have strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to what your job is. Do you want it to be a single purpose? Do you want it to be a dual purpose? I mean, you can see all this stuff. Like I just watched a video the other day of a French bulldog doing bite work. So, I mean, it is whatever you want it to be. Like, I mean, some people say that if you want to do tracking, you have to have a bloodhound. And I mean, I've seen some patrol dogs that are German Shepherds or Belgian Malinois or Dutch Shepherds or whatever, and they do amazing at it. Yeah. But then you also have on the other spectrum, you have labs that are doing it. You have everything. It's just, what do you want it to do? And what is the need of some agencies? Like they always are like, we want the biggest, baddest dogs. Okay, but what agency do you work for? Do you work for an agency that you're doing apprehensions all the time, you're going on SWAT call-outs, or are you an agency that you really don't get that much work in the sense of apprehension, you're doing more drug work or whatever? So it just depends, I think, on like what your need is. But I think definitely there is not a single breed that can do it. It is, as long as you select the right dog with the right hunt drive, the willingness to learn, and then you have a trainer who is willing to change things for the dog and work with the dog, you can have anything. Like, I mean, the labs are one that everybody said you can't track with them. And then you prove it wrong when they're tracking. I mean, I know my dog, when we started, I thought it was going to be different. Now that's all he likes to do. Like that is his one thing that he's like, I will track all day long. I'll do everything else. He loves finding people, but the tracking is his thing. It's just amazing to see when they start doing it and they like it.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the interesting thing when you look at like genetics, and some dogs have a really good genetic predisposition to behavior, right? So you can take a lab or a hunting dog and they may have a predisposition to just putting their nose to the ground, right? Where, you might have a Shepherd or a Malinois who has more of a predisposition to bite you. Yeah. Right? They're more mouthy. So again, it's like you look at all these qualities and that can help you to make a decision. But I've learned from my own stupidity and mistakes handling a tracking dog that this is a team effort.
Yeah.
And I think you spent more time probably teaching us not to screw up,
Yeah.
than you did teaching the dog to track, because they already know, right?
Yeah. I think like all the dogs know. Like, I mean, if you think about it and you look at it, all these dogs, when they used to be wolves and way before we were around, the dog comes and there's a rabbit that ran this way. And if a dog comes up to it, and all the dogs that went this way didn't make it because they didn't eat. All the dogs that followed the rabbit and tracked the rabbit and got to eat, they lived. All of the dogs have it. Like these dogs have it. We just have to bring it out in them. And it's super cool to see when you do it because there's that time where it just clicks and you see it and you're like, you now understand what we're doing. And yeah, it is. I think tracking, I think that's the big thing that I like it is dope work and like a building search, like even a building search. Okay, we know someone's inside, you cut them off lead, they go find them. Great, awesome. You do dope work, you pretty much walk them up. If they know what they're doing, you don't have to really do much, and they're searching on their own. But tracking to me is so a team effort of like checking stuff. Like, I mean, you put a little bit of pressure. Are we on the track? Oh yeah, we're on the track. Okay, cool. We keep going rather than just like driving them around and just being their driver. It is such a team thing. And then reading when people are at the end of your tracks, you get a proximity alert. So if someone's hiding and they're in a bush and depending on the wind, all their odor is blowing too. The dog is tracking and then his head will go up and he'll be like, oh, there he is. And that's super cool because you have to read it.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're right on top of the person and now you're really close to someone. And if you're looking for like an armed suspect, depends on the day, but yeah, it's a little bit of a puckering effect.
Are there things that you do specifically different when you're teaching a proximity alert with a dog that's going to have an apprehension at the end?
So, yeah, I think the big thing and one thing for me is always keeping like, yes, we are tracking human odor. We are tracking people. That is 100% what the job of tracking is. But I try and keep people out of the track. Like if we're running a track, obviously someone will go lay the track, but I'm not putting someone in a decoy suit. I'm not putting someone at the end of a lot of tracks. I'll do it once in a while, depending on the dog, but I don't want the dog to start being just looking for the person and seeing a tree and being like, oh, someone could be hiding over there. Let's go over there. I want the dog to be on the track and want to be on that track. And then I'll teach the proximity alert and all that later, and we'll come back to it and we'll teach an area search. And then you can pair it together and then put someone out in the track once in a while, and then you see it all come together. And especially with like the apprehension dogs and the patrol dogs, it's not something that I think you need to do a lot because if you select the right dog, you do the training right, your dog's going to bite the person and apprehend the person when it comes down to it. It's not really that worry. You can read it well enough to where you see the dog's nose to start to rise and you now turn that into an area search and you turn in, or you make more announcements and you get to cover and you make more announcements and person gives up, or then we're turning into possibly a barricade suspect, whatever, and then doing it that way. I think that's the best way to do it. But I think it definitely depends on the agency, where you work and what you're going after.
It's kind of like the ratio when you're teaching detection dogs of blanks versus hides.
Yeah.
You got to cap the drive, right? And so I would imagine you do too many apprehensions at the end of the track. Is the dog going to slow down and track as methodically, or are they going to be in the mindset of, I just need to get to this guy as fast as possible?
And I've seen it. Like, I think my big thing is like, I came from a dog that it was a struggle to get him to track. So for me, I was like, I want to make sure he tracks. And I've seen people who go completely the opposite way, and they're always putting someone in a bite suit or putting someone at the end of a track. And then you have a dog that all of a sudden is not tracking, and he just is nose up running around looking to bite someone. And I think that kind of defeats the purpose of it, of tracking. And then you have a dog that when it actually comes time where the suspect isn't there, or the suspect is way further away than 100 yards away and they can wind scent, now your dog can't find anybody. And that's my big thing, is just staying away from that and not letting that happen and being focused on the track and, hey, we're tracking, so let's track.
Yeah. And when it comes to like training, I find that I screw up a lot.
Everybody does. Yeah.
And then a lot of times the way that I try to correct myself is is in training, right? And I can find that through my training, I can better how I, can handle a real
Mhm.
life deployment. And so, with that in mind, what do you think for maybe handlers that are listening that have tracking dogs that have trained and they have an understanding of tracking? What are some ways or new things that you think adding to their training could reduce failures on deployments?
I think the biggest thing with tracking and like once you get a dog up and he's actually tracking, I think there's like two stages of training with tracking. You have the training the dog phase and the handler phase also. I mean, the
Yeah.
handler is definitely as important as the dog, but then once the dog has a good understanding is tracking and the handler understands reading the dog, all that is then going to operational stuff. Like I like to do a lot of stuff in fields or in parking lots or whatever, depending on what we're teaching. But then we go to operational stuff of what it's actually going to look like in real life, what it looks like to have a cover officer with you, where you're in the middle of a business center or you're in the middle of a field and someone's actually trying to get away. And then also not running known tracks all the time, especially in the operational phase, because it's important for the handler to see, okay, this is what the dog looks like when he's tracking. This is what he looks like when he's not, so that he can read it and go back and be like, okay, where were we last tracking? How can we solve these problems? But also tracking is it's a very ebb and flow. Like you want the dog to work on his own and like go out and search, but you also don't want to teach him so much like only listen to me. So it's a
Yeah.
very ebb and flow of depends on the dog of how we're going to do it. But doing unknowns, I think, are a great thing with tracking because you read it and then especially having to actually figure it out on your own. And that's one thing that I think is really when you are running through tracks, you have all that. The dog knows how to track, you understand how to track, then you start doing operational stuff. And one of my favorite things is, okay, I went out, laid a track. There's an article out there, go find both of them or however many articles there are, and nobody goes with them.
Yep.
And it's the handler and the dog. And you see if the handler actually understands, oh yeah, I'm actually am able to read my dog and
Yeah.
work the dog in those scenarios. So that's a fun one. That's one of my favorite ones to do because most of the time they come back with the articles. And if they don't, it's no big deal. Cool.
Yep.
What do we need to work on? But it gives the handler, I think, the biggest benefit on that because now they're like, oh, I can do this. I
Mhm.
understand that I can actually do this in real life.
Yeah, and we don't like failure in training.
No, but you have to. And the
But
dogs have to fail and
yeah.
handlers have to fail because like you have to understand that failure is going to happen, but also that's how you teach. Like
Yeah.
if the dog doesn't fail, okay, we're not always going to give you the answer. Like you can't always win. Like,
That's the biggest thing I think that we take away even from detection work,
yeah.
right? We want the win. So we take the
Hmm.
dog in, and if it's a known hide, I'm like, I want my dog to find it.
Yeah. And then
But
you're doing 10 passes of
right.
a pass where you know the odor is and you're tapping on it and you're like, okay, well, what did I actually teach? Did I teach
Yeah.
the dog the odor or am I teaching the dog to listen to me and I'll give you all the answers?
Right. You hit the nail on the head. And I think for tracking, this one's huge because a lot of times, and I think for like if there's any, supervisors or people in a more of like a command staff role listening, we are depending on good information from our patrol
Hmm.
officers or even if you're tracking in sport work, right? You're dependent on what information do you
Yeah.
have? Because if you start at the wrong place or you're given the wrong initial odor, you could be tracking the wrong person, right?
Yeah.
And a
And
lot of times it's all these things that are going to dictate if you're successful or not before it's even down to you or your dog, right?
yeah. And I think it comes down to it's funny, especially on the patrol side, like in law enforcement. Dave Wayne taught me like having like 8 questions and like having this list of questions. And I remember like when he was going over, I was like, okay, whatever. And then I got back and I started doing it. And one of his big things was take the suspect or the victim or whatever and have them walk you to where they last saw the person, where you can start your track. Because if you have them describe it, it may be different. And I remember I asked someone and they were like, oh, yeah, by this tree. And they went west. And I remember I was like, okay. And I was like, come on, can you just show me? And they took me out and they took me to a completely different tree that I thought. And they actually were going east rather than west. So I could have messed that up completely on that.
Right.
And that was one of those things that I tell people, I'm like, have them go show you where they last saw it, because that's going to be your best
Yeah.
way to start it.
Do you teach a lot, like, I guess now that you've worked a dog, you've taught multiple dogs, do you teach more odor discrimination now, you think, than you did kind of in the beginning of tracking?
I would say probably. Yeah, I definitely focus on that. But I think it also goes back to what your agency is. Like, if you're working for an agency that's super rural and there's 500 people that live in your city, a little different than like Phoenix PD or
Yeah.
like Denver PD or people in a massive metropolitan area, you have to do way more discrimination than probably the person at a smaller agency or super small town where you're tracking through cornfields or whatever, rather than through open space with hundreds of houses all around, or and like golf courses and people are running around and all sorts of things. It definitely depends, but I would say, yeah, I when I do that, I definitely focus on that just because I want the dog to be so focused on what we're actually tracking.
Yeah, and something that, you taught us that we've kind of found when it comes to discrimination in like certain areas, right? People don't always comply with the fact that, hey, my missing person went east
Hmm.
on this sidewalk, and now I have three bicyclists and a lady
Yeah,
walking her dog this direction. They don't understand, nor are they trying to impede your
yeah,
investigation, but that really messes with my odor a lot and can really disturb it, even if it's not even if my dog can ignore the contamination. What is it doing to that area? Is it completely displacing the odor? Can it throw me onto a different area? Now I've lost the track.
yeah.
They don't understand that. So I think for us, you really have to almost incorporate this in your training. And we've learned that putting some items or
Hmm.
articles right in the beginning. So if somebody says, "Hey, here's my sister's shirt,"
Yeah.
right? Another myth busting. It's not like in the movies where I just say, "Here, Fido," and he just goes and finds the
Yeah.
person. Now I can lay it down, I can cast him
Hmm.
across it, and then hope that he instantly loses it and has to go refind it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's ways like you had taught us to do that. But hopefully for like, handlers out there that are working in different areas, they can kind of alter their training, like you
Oh,
said.
yeah.
And that'll be hugely beneficial because what other elements really impact odor on a track?
I think definitely weather. Weather is probably a big one that will play how old the track is. Like tracking in Colorado is way different than like in a super humid climate like the Midwest, and where you go out and there's so much moisture in the air that odor is staying everywhere.
Yeah.
Colorado's super dry. That's definitely a big factor. Time of year, like, is it snowing? Is it raining? How much humidity? How much wind? What is going on around you? That definitely plays in to factors. And I always tell people, I'm like, okay, start out to where the dog's tracking, and then now it's time to mess with them. Where we're waiting 2 hours to go run the track or an hour or so, but definitely just trying to keep building on with the dog to where he's like, oh, okay, yeah, I have to keep doing this. But the hard thing with contamination is if you have like a track that happened like 30 minutes ago and then someone walks by, that's the most recent track. That's the easier one to go on. So it's
Mhm.
teaching the dog, no, stay on the one that you're here and focus on that.
So, what are some tips for listeners? How can they set up and induce some of this in like a field?
So definitely field work is one that I'm like, that's the lab. That's where we go and like we train the dogs and we're working on something specific. So like lay a track, just a straight track, 100 yards or so. And then at like 50 yards, have someone standing out there. And right before you go on the track, however long you want the main track to be, you let that be. And then someone will just walk across the track right before you go. And then it's a great test with the patrol dogs is have the person stand out there. And
Mhm.
then you still have the most recent track and the person standing out there, and your dog needs to focus on that. And it's super easy. It's just like discrimination with odors. Just let him figure it out. And then, cool. As soon as he does it, great. There we go.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because dogs often will look for the easiest
Hmm.
answer, right? And so I could see how maybe even my dog that's a lab who's not an apprehension dog would be tracking and then say, there's somebody, let me
Yeah.
go see if that's so, and this is something I think that's a great point, because that would translate right to a real life scenario where there's people everywhere.
Yeah.
And just because you see somebody doesn't mean that's the answer.
Hmm.
We could be in a hell of a lot of trouble if you pick your nose up and go to them and now we've
Yeah.
lost it.
Yeah. Or we keep doing it. And that's why I love doing the operational stuff at the end of their training, once they understand it, is doing it in real life places where you're actually going to go track, because that's where you're going to be tracking. Like if you have a city and it's a lot of business centers or residential stuff, go track there, because that's where you're going to be doing it in real life. And then when you actually go to get your dog out on the real track, he's like, oh yeah, I get this. It's no big deal. Like we've done this hundreds of times. So definitely doing the operational stuff where you actually are going to do it.
And do you think, I mean, I know urban, like, when I started in law enforcement, 16 years ago, even, we were told at our agency, like, oh, you can't urban track. It's
No.
too hard. And now, even at that time, people were tracking in urban environments, right?
Yeah.
But I think now it's becoming more prevalent where a lot of law enforcement agencies have tracking dogs and they're doing urban tracking. So do you think that there's more of a need to train more hard surface?
I think depending on where you are, like I love to train the hard surface, because if they can do hard surface, they can definitely do field work. It is one of those things that I've seen recently where teaching in the grass is getting them squared away in there, and then going to hard surface tracking is one thing that I like doing, because it's almost weird. Like if you start with hard surface and then go to grass, it's almost like you're teaching two different things, but it depends on your environment. I mean, there's so many methods to teach it. Like there's using distilled water out of a sprayer. There's walking barefoot. One of my favorite ones now is the rice method. So I'll take like rice from the grocery store, put in my pocket, carry it around for a day, and then I teach hard surface tracking off that, to where the rice is actually holding the odor and they're getting more odor than if it was just completely blank. And it's great to teach transitions from grass to hard surface or hard surface to grass, to where you are actually giving them something, you're giving them a little help, and then they actually believe and they're like, oh, I can find the odor on hard surface, rather than just blowing past it to get away from it.
Now, with that method, because I do like that idea, I mean, it holds a little bit more odor than just scuffing your feet on the ground, right? Would it be a good idea for handlers to then maybe cross-contaminate the track and have the contaminator dropping their rice, so that you're almost eliminating, you're almost proofing them off of the rice and onto the odor.
Yeah. And then definitely getting away from the rice. Like once everything, like no matter what you do, you have to proof yourself off of it, or you have to take a step back and be like, okay, can't really use this anymore. The dog needs to figure it out. Like we're just giving them help. We're just helping them to learn all of it.
Yeah. And I think something kind of fascinated me recently when we were talking about like mental health, because our dogs are tracking a lot of people that could potentially be just missing. Right? We don't have any dogs that are tracking, well, now we do have one, but now we have Pavo, right? He can track people. But, before that, we could be tracking somebody who's on medication for something. We're, understanding now that medication or mental health diagnosis even changes the odor of the person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing with the odor of people, like whether it's a suspect, whether it's a missing person, that could smell very similar depending on how they are and their adrenaline and all of the chemicals in their body. So it's definitely an interesting concept. I mean, I think the dogs that track missing people, it all correlates. All of this correlates. All of the tracking correlates with everybody. Like that's why I don't think, like if you have a dog that is a single purpose that tracks like missing people, you can go train with the patrol dogs. There's no difference really. It's just how it ends. Your dog is going to walk up and hang out with the person or pet them, and the other dog wants to apprehend them. So it just depends on how that goes.
Yeah, it's been kind of helpful. And I think when we do our training, obviously we try to balance like known versus unknown, leaning more towards unknowns, and then picking different environments. Like you talked about, the operational tracking has been huge. But what are your thoughts on using multiple methods on dogs that are already trained to strengthen?
I love messing with dogs, like, and trying new things. I'll see something or I'll hear something of how someone does it. I'm like, let's go try it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on the dog. But
Yeah.
I definitely think as much as you can get to help teach the dog something is a benefit to them. It's only going to benefit them. Teaching them, showing them as many pictures, helping them out any way that we can, but also balancing that, hey, you still have to figure it out on your own, but I'm going to help you.
Yeah, and I wonder too, like starting with a fresh dog, right? You say you want to start in the grass. What are your thoughts on even in that early stage using different methodologies? Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
said, to give them as many pictures,
Yeah.
right? Because the more pictures you give them, especially like in odor work, the more pictures you give them sooner,
Yeah.
the more clarity they have on odor.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I love it. I love doing as much as we can with the dog, whether it's like some dogs, I'll get out of the fields really quick and I'll be like, okay, we can go to hard service. They understand it. But it's just balancing that with them. I mean, whatever works with the dog, like some dogs, like you said, some dogs were struggling in the beginning when we were working with your guys' dogs. And then in the end, they were the best tracking dogs and
yeah,
they loved it more. And it cleaned up other stuff in other areas because
yeah,
it starts to enhance their nose really, because they are like, sometimes it's so little human odor or ground disturbance that they're tracking. And it's almost like resetting their nose to where now their threshold is lower, and
yeah.
doing dope or doing explosives or whatever, it changes it. But I definitely think tracking kind of helps with everything. And it's really rounds a dog out, I think.
What are your thoughts on if you have a dog that is going to be multi-purpose? What's your communication to the dog that they're doing this exercise?
So that's one of, I think, the biggest thing is the dog having clarity on what they're doing. One thing that I did with my dog early on, like he had his patrol harness and then he had a tracking harness. And as soon as I would put that on, and I started that very early, was just the ritual of, okay, taking off his patrol harness, putting on his tracking harness, and then kind of setting myself up in a different way. I would always have my way of, he's in the car, I go out, talk to the suspect, victim, or the witnesses, and figure out kind of what's going on, kind of compose myself, figure out how I'm going to do it, how I'm going to set up my line. And then I would go take his patrol harness on, put on his tracking harness, make sure he had gone to the bathroom, and then take him out. And as soon as I would get him out, his nose would hit the ground and he would be looking for the track. And then walk him up, put him in a down, and then start my track. I think whatever it is, I know some people like put the leash under the arm, which is great. Whatever it is, just be consistent with it. Like, do this when we're tracking, we're doing this. Or when we're doing a building search, no matter what, you're setting it up differently. Like, you got to do a sniff on a vehicle, it's going to be completely different than how you do a building odor work, or a building search, or for a person or an area search. And I think if the dog understands it clearly, you don't even have to make an announcement on the dog, or you don't have to tell the dog his command. He understands completely what it is. And that's going to keep that dog so clear headed on, oh, I understand my job. And it's going to create less conflict.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think of like, when I think of rituals, I do see a lot of law enforcement canine handlers doing a good job with their rituals. Where I could see this being beneficial would be like a search and rescue, right?
Yeah.
Because they may be just hanging at home and then now, hey, we've got to go drive an hour and then search.
Yeah.
And maybe the dog knows, maybe they have a good ritual, but really clearly defining this, I feel like cleans it up a lot, because sometimes some of this can look similar. If you are a canine handler in law enforcement and you have one harness, you're going to have to be creative with,
Yeah.
hey, what do I hook to a different piece of equipment? Or like you said, hooking under the arm. I've even messed with, my dog likes to track really fast, which is not always very efficient, right? I want him to be efficient and maybe slow himself down a little bit. So I've even messed with the prong collar under the arm, right?
Yeah.
But again, not for every dog, because if you correct them off the track, now you're going to be retraining things, right? And so it's like a balancing act to get this ritual down. But I think for those sport handlers or people that maybe aren't in law enforcement that are doing tracking or messing with it, creating a ritual is good for a dog.
Yeah.
Unlike trying to take your pet dog for a walk, don't create a ritual for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Then you have a
Then
monster.
then they're in the wrong mindset before you do the activity. So when it comes to handler failures, right? We talked a little bit about kind of changing our training to do that. What What's the most common failure you think on deployments that handlers do?
I think the biggest one with like, and from my experiences, is not asking the right questions in the beginning, or way too much contamination, whether our perimeters are probably the biggest thing in law enforcement that we struggle with. Is we either didn't set up a right perimeter, we set up too late, we set up too small, and the person got away. And if someone's just running, they're going to go. They're going to keep running until they get stopped. Now, when you see like a patrol car and you have a perimeter set up and they bed down, now we're actually keeping them inside. But my big thing was definitely asking the right questions, and where actually did the person go? Show me where they did is definitely a big benefit. I think time sometimes depends on your environment, like we were talking about. And then just the dog understanding clearly what his job is.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and I know some agencies don't have lots of resources,
Yeah.
but I want to kind of remind people too that maybe aren't handling a dog. When we start a track and we have a longer time delay, like a
Mm-hmm.
3-hour
Yeah.
delay, that means I could potentially be 3 hours behind the person.
Yeah.
Right. So I had one recently where a girl went wandering off in the middle of the night, and we went to track, and my dog was on what I believe to be the track directly from the house. And we were tracking for a while. And fortunately, we had other resources. We had a drones in the air who found her in the area, but she was way ahead of where I was going. And so sometimes it's good to know, like, the dogs can be doing the right thing and you might still not find the person,
Oh yeah.
you know?
I had one where, like, we always tell our patrol guys, stay in the car, especially if we're like tracking a suspect or whatever. Stay in your car, don't contaminate all that. Let's be careful. But I mean, even just as much as like, hey, when you get on scene, don't go walking around trying to find the suspect, because now you're contaminating my start,
Yeah.
and that can completely change everything. And there's been times where I thought I asked the right questions, asked patrol guys, where did you guys go? And then I end up tracking the patrol car and I'm like, sweet, we got to go restart all this. But it is what it is. I think just teaching your agency or whoever you're doing, hey, this is what we need to be successful. And once they understand that and you're helping patrol's helping you, you can really find anybody depending on the circumstances. I also think the big thing is just teaching the dog, like, hey, I'm not going to show you everything is exactly what is and it's the right answer. You have to figure it out on your own, but also being in there of helping them out. It's a teamwork.
Yeah. And I think some of our handlers went to a training recently where they brought up something kind of interesting, which was when we train, a lot of times we may use multiple articles on the track, but sometimes you track somebody for 45 minutes and there is no articles. So they brought up like, almost like not using a marker word that's going to pull them off of what they're doing, but using that continuation reinforcement. And so that's something that I think is good, but you definitely have to try that with your dog in training, because it actually almost had an opposite effect.
Yeah.
I could tell my dog good while he's on the track, and all of a sudden he's like, wait, what am I doing? And then it was counteractive. But I think if you can install that in the beginning, some of those communication aspects could be really beneficial.
Yeah, I think once again, it comes down to the dog. Like, I know, and sometimes the best thing is just to be quiet and let the dog do his job. I know if I do that, like, I would give my dog like, oh, good. He'd be like, what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, never mind. Yep, I'm just going to shut up and let you keep doing your thing. But I've even gone as far as, okay, if you're tracking and give a little snapshot of, hey, I really like what you're doing. You're on the track. Just throw the ball over their head or their tug over their head. Boom, it's in front of them. And now we go back to tracking. Once we have a little bit of play, it just depends on the dog. Like, some dogs, that could completely change it to where now it sends them through the roof and you're not going to get them back on a track. But you also have a dog that's what they need, because they just need to know, hey, yeah, I'm doing what it is. It's just ebbing and flowing with the dogs.
Well, and I will say, for handlers out there listening, one thing that I think I've learned from, and maybe it's worthwhile for them to try, is doing a blank, right?
Yeah.
It's good to practice, yes, blanks and odor work, but we don't think of that as often when it comes to tracks. But what do you do if you get there and maybe the suspect left right from there in a car.
Mhm.
Well, practicing that,
Yeah.
casting the area, hey, there's no track here.
Yeah.
That's just as important, right?
That was so I had a deployment where some dude called in one of our state parks and was like, I just got robbed by 4 dudes. So we show up and I get out, we set everything up, had everything the way we wanted, took him. I was like, where were they last seen? All this. Start casting my dog, trying to find the track, and tried every direction, tried everything. And I'm sitting there like, cool, my dog's broken. And I was like, I don't even know like where to begin. Like, what did we mess up? Like, what did I do wrong? What is wrong with him? Like, is he sick? What's going on? And I just remember, and I was like, trust the dog, just trust the dog. And put him back up. And I like sat there and I went back up to him, the victim. And I was like, where did you take them? Take me back to where it is. And he took me and I'm like, dude, where is this? Because I really don't believe you at this point. And he ends up then telling us that he lied about it because he wanted to ride back up home. So that was that was probably my biggest time of like just sitting there and honestly kind of feeling bad for my dog and being like, my bad, dude, I should have trusted you more because you can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that read is so important because assumptions are huge,
Mhm.
and in that case, right, training those blanks to where the dog's like, hey, it's a good thing still for me to show you that
Yeah.
there's nothing here and I'm going to get rewarded
And
is
you're not always going to find something. There was not
yeah.
always something in here. So don't
Yeah.
start doing crazy stuff. You just do what I have taught you.
Yeah. And again, I'm the dumb side of the league. So I can tell you, I make assumptions. That's a bad thing to do,
Yeah.
right? Because especially with a tracking dog, you're watching, you're reading your dog, and all of a sudden you assume like, I think they went this
Yeah.
direction.
Mhm.
And, I was talking to a handler recently. Is like, the information I was given was that the person went this way.
Yeah.
I started taking the dog that way, even though he was telling me his read was it went this way.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they wound up back there, and that's where they found a bunch of articles and
Yeah.
things. And those sort of times in your deployments or your trainings are where you're like, yeah, I really am done. I just need to read my dog better.
And it's just trusting the dog. Like I've done that too, where I'm like, no, he had to have gone this way. The information that we have, he had to have gone this way, or this makes more sense. But the dog's like pulling you over here and legit trying to go over there, and you just keep pulling him off. And then finally the dog's like, okay, dad must know. But it was always over there. So then trusting him, and then he goes over there and you find the person or you find the article and you're like, my bad, man. That was on me.
Yeah. And something else you could incorporate in your training too is sometimes people run, one direction and they backtrack on their actual track and then go a different direction, right? So if your dog goes and they're like, oh, well, we saw the suspect down there,
But he actually went.
but now he's come back and he's backtracked and he's turned this way. Again, this is where sometimes the information and the communication between your dog and you and other officers can really get you in a bind.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I've really enjoyed working with the drones only because I may be on the right track, but they can get a ways ahead of me. They can kind of dispel some of that. Hey, I know he might have seen him up here, but there's nobody up here. Okay, I'm going to read my dog then and go this direction. So I think for handlers out there who may be new to tracking, don't be afraid to throw more blanks. Don't be afraid to, once you hit that operational stage like you talked about, throw curveballs, right?
Yeah. Backtrack, circle tracks, having the person laying your track lay down on the ground, do all that, walk away. It shows you different pictures. It's funny. Some dogs will show it to you. Some dogs will go on that backtrack and come back. Some dogs will be like, nope, I already know because the direction doesn't make sense. So I'm going to go this way. And they are able to read that. The circles, they'll work on the outside depending on the wind. Sometimes they'll actually do the circle. It just depends on the dog. But yeah, throwing as much as you can at them and teaching them as much as you can of what's actually going to happen in real life and how to work through it, and seeing that picture of, this is the answer to this is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I always encourage people, if you're new to this, if you're trying to find more information, the best thing you can do in canine is assume you know nothing.
Yeah.
That's my motto. Assume I'm still dumb and I like to learn from everybody. And I encourage people to reach out. Kingdom Canine, they put on tracking classes. They do, they will come to you.
Yeah, we'll go
Um,
anywhere.
And so it's worthwhile. We're constantly learning just how dumb we really are. And so it makes us better in the long run. And so kingdomcanine.com, or you can just, pester me, and I'll give you James Stiltner's personal cell phone number. Just
do
call
it.
him all the time.
Yeah, preferably if you live in like a nice warm area and we can go track in San Diego. I would rather that.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and
Of course,
talking
thanks
about
for having me.
tracking and-